My name's Adam Pletcher. I am currently a technical art architect at the studio, and I at the during Red Faction, I was actually mostly on other projects, but I did contribute a bit to the user interface design for the multiplayer component of Red Faction PC and PlayStation. Multiplayer, the interface at least was sort of started fairly later on. Yeah, and I just really just mainly contributed to yeah, the multiplayer join screens on the PC and the some of the scoreboard stuff and a few of the in-game things related to the multiplayer modes like um, the waving banners for capture the flag mode. I spent way too much time on those things. We had actual designers at the time, which was a fairly new thing. Prior to those projects at that time, design was just sort of this thing that whoever wanted to could contribute to, which sounds crazy now, of course, but I don't. I think I think I did a little bit help a little bit with the balance and such with the multiplayer modes but I wasn't like a level designer, so I couldn't really, a lot of the design for those modes was pretty level centric and I didn't really have a hand in that per se. But yeah, I mean, I played it a lot. I mean, it was fun. I liked, being a part of the community interaction at the time anyway, it was kind of a different world. It's not really something you can easily dip your toe into these days, but it's kind of a much bigger deal. Community management is really it's like at least for the games the size of the ones we make now, uh, it's kind of it's a full-time thing. I mean, we've got people that do that and the things that they are have to learn and are trained on is just nothing compared to the way it used to be. I mean, it used to be just developers just hop on a forum somewhere or IRC or whatever the heck and just start talking to fans, and we didn't have to worry too much about this or that. And um, the fans were always very polite, and you know uh, s- that's not always the case these days. It's a tricky thing, and yeah, it's nothing that you can really just pop into. And like we have to go through, if we want to be engaged with the public, we have to go through a certain amount of training and whatnot. And we can certainly still do so, but it's just not something you can just, pop into. The bigger the company is, the more formal it's got to be. I mean, that's kind of true for a lot of roles, not just like community management and interaction. It also might vary a lot depending on whether the company is publicly traded or not, because the sort of scrutiny that's put on things that are information that gets out on the public is a lot higher for a company that's on the stock market. I don't remember it being too formal. I mean, we certainly tried to work. We started working more closely over those years with marketing and brand, and trying to have a coherent message when we talk to fans and the community. It was starting to shift more towards more of a company run thing, and as it out of necessity. I remember a lot of like certainly not in the lifespan of like the first couple Red Faction titles. I just wasn't much of an expert in the game itself. It was at the time we had basically had two branches at this two project lines at the studio, and one was Summoner and one was Red Faction, and I was really more on the Summoner side. I came from the free space side. That was like, my kind of my baby. So, um, yeah, I didn't really have a lot of. By the time Red Faction started, I was on Summoner One or something along those lines. They didn't start at exactly the same time, but it's pretty close. On the game teams, I mean, I'd say roles are more specialized now because the team is bigger. each person doesn't have to wear as many hats or really can't, and you can't be a master of several things. You gotta kind of specialize a little bit. Um, it was fun in those earlier years. You could, someone like me could, contribute in a few different ways, but at some point, the industry and the games got more complex, and it just became too difficult to do that, and you have to kind of choose more of a specialized path, and everybody had to do that, and that's kind of the big difference, I would say. I mean, personally, I'm also not like as directly on the game teams anymore as I used to be. I'm in between that time period and now. We started like a central tools and technology group at the studio that serves like all the projects, and I'm part of that. um, I'm kind of one of the architects on that group. So we do tools and tech for all of our projects. So I know I'm not as sort of personally engaged day to day in day to day work with individual projects the way I used to back then. There are people who certainly are. I mean, most of the studio is still on the project in a more direct way. It's just that even they are, bit more specialized. You probably won't see, if one of them wants to engage with the public, like I said, they can certainly do so. They just have to kind of, uh, go through a little process with brand in order to do that. If I remember correctly, like there was a lot of we had to do our own matchmaking system for Free Space 2, and it was difficult. Well, we actually did it for Free Space 1, but that was hard. It was hard to do it in a fair way, like offer leaderboards in a way that's sort of fair and difficult to sort of cheat. So you put a public board up there. Players are going to want to sort of bend the rules a bit if they can, and we didn't. This is the first like system like that we'd ever made, so there was all kinds of holes in it and easy ways to exploit it, and it was an interesting time period trying to like fix the worst of those and keep everyone from getting too upset about the state of the high score charts. But besides that, I don't remember. So I think a lot of those free space updates were sort of related to those features. Um, Not all of them, but yeah, we had quite a few updates on the free space titles. I think we were just really wanting to get them out quickly. Nobody was really managing our update process. It wasn't really like we have to go through Sony or Microsoft. It was basically it's a PC game, so we can put up a patch every day if we want. But yeah, that's not fun. I don't know what the expectations were. Um, yeah, I wasn't really part of that in the loop there. I don't know. I'm not sure we really had one as far as like at the time. I don't think we often had plans on like, well, we're going to do two updates or whatever. I think it was sort of like, well, we don't know how many we're going to need. We'll do as many as we need to get it in a, you know, stable, as reasonably bug free as possible, and without spending a ton of time on it and wanting to kind of move forward to the next game or whatever. So I don't know. Don't really have a good answer there. Yeah, I did. I did a few times. Like we did one or two like organized events. I think, if I remember correctly, at least for the PC version. And then I think just casually, I did a few times, and I'm sure I got my ass kicked every time. So that's just how it goes, at least with me. I think modding is still a big deal for a lot of people, and I think any support we can sort of even unofficially offer for that sort of thing is always very well received. Um, there, my interactions with the modding community has been nothing but positive. Like even from what I've seen more recently, um, they're super smart people, and they can muscle through all sorts of gaps and and problems, and it's just fun being able to help them out any way we can. I think as a studio, we've always been glad to do that. We don't always have all the time we wish to have that sort of support for the community, but we're certainly trying, and we're still looking forward to doing more of that with future titles as well. It's great. It's hard to imagine. Well, I don't know. I mean, I suppose you could point at any game and find somebody still playing it, regardless of the age. But that's having like a community that's still doing content like this is pretty great. I don't know. I don't know how common that is. Like I don't really. I've never really researched like well, pick another game from that time period and go see if there's a community still doing stuff for it. Can't imagine that's true for every game. So yeah, I feel pretty fortunate to at least for a couple of our titles have that sort of I know there's still a free space community, and they're doing awesome stuff, every year. So that's pretty great. Yeah, I think it's awesome. No, I don't think. I mean, no, I wouldn't say so. Like all of our sort of best-selling games, um, they've often like outperformed our expectations. It's just we've been fortunate like that to have more hits than misses. So there's not too many studios that can say that. So we've been very, very lucky. I think I think that was true for Red Faction as well. I mean, especially new IP. I mean, it's like the hardest thing to do. It's not licensed IP. It's a brand new thing that you've cooked up and you're trying to convince people is interesting enough to plop down their money for. That's like one of the hardest things to do. It's only gotten harder since then, but even back then it wasn't easy. So I think you know, e- even modest successful titles were, sort of like, hey, great, it made money, that's awesome. It didn't lose money. That's kind of the big thing. It takes more effort on the player's part to go find games back then, but it didn't seem like a chore because that's all there was, right? I think now if you didn't have that pretty well automated and solid and um, yeah, I mean some of the things I was joking about with the free space leaderboards, like you do any, you put out something like that today, you'd get creamed. Not a lot. I mean, I know that. I mean, Descent 4 was a thing for a brief period of time, and it was um, really didn't get too much further than like the drawing board. I mean, it was all conceptual, like on design and some art. Um, yeah, I don't have a lot of it, or memory or insight into how that transition happened. Just that it was decided that wasn't going to be the right fit for the next Descent game. And what else could we, is there any new design we can come up with that might leverage this sort of thing? And somehow that did turn into Red Faction at some point. Racer X is the handle, the sometimes gamer tag used by Jason Whiteside. So it's possible that he made those maps. He's been at the company almost as long as me. He was brought on as a level designer. I believe he was still in college at the time here in Champaign. Could be wrong about that. I think he was. I think he was like interning. But he's a level designer on the first Descent game, so he's an old timer for sure. And um, he's still here. He's still employed at Volition. It is his old gamer tag. Whether or not that meant he made those maps or not, I couldn't say offhand, but it wouldn't surprise me at all. He did work on Red Faction, and I would imagine that would mean it was those were his maps. But he's an art outsourcing manager now. Yeah, I don't know for sure what happened there, but sometimes those are hosted. I mean, they're often not hosted literally in our building, so we haven't always had full control over them. and it might have been someone someone at the publisher decided it was time to pull the plug and may or may not have even asked us about it. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not aware of anything. Um, at least nothing serious. I mean, we always talk about what could come next, while we're still developing something. Um, but it's all just chatter. I'm not aware of anything beyond that, anything that got more momentum. No. I mean, honestly, it's usually like, I mean, we all know, like, well, if this game doesn't do well enough, then there's probably not going to be much point in getting our hopes up or making too many plans for another one because it just wouldn't make any sense. I mean, they're products, at the end of the day. So um, yeah, I'm not aware of anything, but I'm also not sure I would have been, just because I wasn't like in a position on that project like the way I was on some others. There's always a chance, like of any old title getting, a reboot or something. But yeah, nothing, certainly nothing I would say on the near horizon. We're focusing on the Saints Row title. That's about all I know. Like we're trying to get that thing done.